Coco Gauff thought winning the French Open would be the greatest moment of her life. The kind of achievement that defines a career. But just hours after holding that trophy, she got a phone call that left her sobbing in disbelief. On the other end wasn't a sponsor, a coach, or even a family member. It was an Italian billionaire named Giovanni Moretti, and what he offered her parents would completely change their lives forever.
But she found a way. Here she's giving her mother a hug, her mom, who was praying on TV, and her dad, Corey.
This wasn't just generous. It was the kind of gesture that money can't explain, and the world is still talking about it. But to understand why this offer hit Coco so deeply, you have to see what really happened after that call, and the truth behind the man who made it. Moments after the biggest win of her career, Coco was still riding that emotional high, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, fans chanting her name. She was soaking it all in, thinking the day couldn't possibly get any better. But then, out of nowhere, her manager rushed into the room, pale and shaking, saying someone urgent was on the line. Coco assumed it was another media request, or maybe a congratulatory call from a sponsor, until she heard the name: Giovanni Moretti, an Italian billionaire known for his empire of luxury resorts, private islands, and an obsession with tennis. But this wasn't a publicity stunt or a marketing call.
Today was the first time I've ever seen my dad cry. He doesn't want me to tell you all that, but he got caught in 4K. He thinks he's so hard, but it's not. So thank you guys. I mean, you believed in me from the beginning. I've been coming to this tournament. My dad took me to this tournament, sitting right there watching Venus and Serena compete. So it's really incredible to be on this stage. Growing up, there wasn't too many just black tennis players dominating the sport. It was literally, at that time when I was younger, it was just them that I can remember. And obviously more came because of their legacy, so it made the dream more believable. But all the things that they had to go through, they made it easier for someone like me.
When Coco picked up, his tone was calm, almost personal. The first thing he asked wasn't about her win, her future, or her brand. It was a simple question that instantly shifted the mood. "How is your family, Coco?" That question hit her harder than any serve she'd ever faced. It wasn't what you expect from a stranger worth billions. At first, she thought it was small talk, but the more he spoke, the more she realized this man knew a lot about her story, the sacrifices her parents made, the long nights on the road, and the financial struggles they hid behind their smiles.
Dad, Candy, Corey, congrats. We saw you closing your eyes for some of this match. When your daughter steps up to that line, serve for her second major, where are your thoughts going?
First, get your serve in and make sure that you stay under control, and that as long as you have another point, you have another chance. And just don't get upset if someone makes a shot. So it's like you have another point, so let's go out and play. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask where your thoughts were going. I'm going to ask where you were going. You don't watch it from out there. Where were you? How'd you experience this?
I kind of move around behind the scenes. I try to find a quiet corner and look at it on my iPad, and then I make notes. And sometimes I'm texting her and texting the coaches if I see something I think they can't see.
And then, without warning, he made an offer so unexpected, so life-changing, that it left Coco completely speechless. Giovanni Moretti wasn't just another rich businessman trying to attach his name to a sports star. He was a quiet power figure in Europe, the kind of billionaire who rarely appeared in headlines, but influenced everything behind the scenes. Born in Milan, he built his fortune through international real estate, private aviation, and high-end sports ventures. But unlike many in his circle, Moretti was known for something unusual: his genuine love for athletes who came from humble beginnings. Over the years, he had quietly funded tennis programs for underprivileged kids, and sponsored youth tournaments without ever taking credit. Those who knew him described him as the billionaire who believes character is more valuable than cash. So when he saw Coco's story, a young black woman from a modest family breaking barriers in a sport often reserved for the elite, it struck a chord with him. He'd followed her rise for years, not just as a fan, but as someone who understood the grind behind the glory. The early mornings, the travel costs, the unseen struggles that most people forget once the cameras start rolling. And as Coco stood on that call, still holding her trophy from the French Open, she had no idea that this man wasn't reaching out for business. He was about to repay years of sacrifice she never thought anyone noticed.
Quite understandably, I see emotional tears in your eyes still. What did today represent?
It represents, like Coco alluded to before, that sometimes when you have a loss and you get down on yourself, but learning that you can pick up, the sun will rise the next day and just keep working at your craft. If this is your passion, you got to give it your all. And what Coco did today was amazing. She never gave up. She fought to the end, and she gave herself the opportunity to hold up the trophy.
Moretti didn't waste time with formalities or flattery. After a brief pause, he told Coco something that froze her in place. He said he wanted to make sure her parents, the people who had given up everything for her dream, would never have to worry again. Then, with complete calm, he explained his plan. He wanted to hire both of her parents as personal development consultants within his organization, roles that would allow them to travel, mentor young athletes, and support Coco's career along the way. And then came the part that made Coco's throat tighten and her eyes well up. He said he'd pay each of them $200,000 per month. That's not a typo. $200,000 every single month, for both her mother and father. For a moment, the room went silent. Coco's team could see the color drain from her face. She pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to process what she'd just heard. This wasn't just generosity, it was life-changing. She tried to speak but couldn't. The only words she managed were a whisper, "I don't know what to say." Moretti's response made the entire moment even more powerful. "Say nothing," he told her. "You've given joy to millions through your tennis. Now let me give something back to the people who gave you everything." That was it. Coco completely broke down. Tears streamed down her face, not from stress or exhaustion, but from pure relief. Years of her parents' sacrifices, years of watching them stretch every dollar and work late nights, were finally being recognized in the most unexpected way imaginable. To understand why that phone call hit Coco so deeply, you have to know what her parents went through to get her there. Before the fame, before the sponsorships, before the trophies, there were years of quiet sacrifice. Her mother, Candy, worked multiple jobs while handling all of Coco's travel and school commitments. Her father, Corey, coached her, managed her training, and often skipped meals so she could eat properly before matches. Every dollar went toward tennis lessons, tournament fees, and flights to competitions most people couldn't afford to attend. There were nights when bills piled up and the only thing keeping them going was faith that their daughter's dream would one day pay off. They drove across states in old cars just to make junior tournaments. They stayed in cheap motels, packed their own meals, and learned to stretch every penny. Even when Coco started gaining attention and sponsorships, her parents refused to slow down. They kept working, not because they had to, but because they didn't want their success to change their work ethic. Coco often said her parents worked harder than anyone she knew, and it wasn't an exaggeration. They weren't chasing fame or money. They were chasing a future for their daughter. And even when Coco became a global name, they still lived humbly, still stayed grounded, and still showed up to every match like it was her first. That's why Moretti's offer wasn't just a gift. It was a moment of recognition. It was someone finally saying, "I see what you did and it mattered." For the Gauff family, this wasn't about wealth. It was about dignity, relief, and validation after years of doing everything the hard way. When Coco hung up that call, she just sat there for a moment, frozen, overwhelmed, and barely able to speak. Her team had never seen her like that. The girl who had just conquered Roland Garros looked more emotional than she did holding the championship trophy. Her eyes were red, her hands were trembling, and she could barely breathe through the tears. Then, without saying a word, she stood up and walked toward the next room where her parents were waiting. They thought she was just coming to celebrate the win. They had no idea what had just happened. When she saw them, Coco collapsed into their arms and whispered the words that would change their lives forever. "You don't have to work anymore." Her mom froze, not understanding what she meant. Her dad just stared at her, confused. Then, through the tears, Coco explained the offer. The positions, the $200,000 a month. The fact that a man they'd never met wanted to take care of them for life. Her mother started crying first, covering her face as the weight of those words sank in. Her father, the man who had always held it together, just sat down in silence, completely speechless. It wasn't about the money, it was about the years of stress, fear, and uncertainty that suddenly vanished in an instant. For the first time, they could breathe. The long nights, the financial sacrifices, the silent pressure, all of it was finally over. Coco later said she'd never seen her dad cry before that day. He'd always been the tough one, the steady one. But when she told him the news, even he broke down. That night, the Gauff family didn't celebrate like celebrities. They just held each other, crying, laughing, and realizing that their story had come full circle. The years of sacrifice had finally turned into security, not through a contract or a trophy, but through an act of compassion that money couldn't truly measure. For Coco, that single phone call did more than change her parents' lives. It changed her mindset forever. For years, she played with a quiet pressure that few people could see. Every serve, every loss, every tournament carried the invisible weight of her family's sacrifices. She wasn't just playing to win titles, she was playing to make sure her parents never had to struggle again. That kind of motivation can be powerful, but it can also be heavy. After her heartbreaking loss at Wimbledon, she admitted she felt like she'd let her family down. It wasn't just about tennis, it was personal. But after Moretti's offer, that pressure disappeared. For the first time, Coco could breathe. She didn't have to worry about her parents' bills, travel expenses, or the constant grind that had defined their lives for so long. That freedom became her greatest strength. Her coach later said that before, Coco played with the heart of someone trying to save her family. Now she plays with the joy of someone who already has. You could see it in her next matches, the looseness in her game, the confidence in her body language, the calm on her face. She wasn't fighting from desperation anymore. She was playing from gratitude, and that's a dangerous combination for any opponent. Because an athlete who no longer carries fear, only purpose, becomes nearly unstoppable. Coco even admitted that knowing her parents were finally secure changed the way she looked at success. "Now I play for me," she said in one interview. "Not because I have to, but because I love to." That simple mindset shift is what separates good athletes from legends. When pressure turns into peace, focus turns into flow. The moment Moretti gave her family financial security, he didn't just change their lives. He unlocked Coco's full potential, and everyone around her could see it. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the money, the fame, or even the generosity itself. It's what it represents. For Coco, this moment wasn't about a billionaire's gift. It was about validation. It was the universe telling her that every sacrifice her parents made, every moment of doubt, every tear, and long night on the road had all been worth it. And for anyone watching, it reminded the world that behind every success story, there's usually a family that gave everything quietly in the background. Parents rarely get the spotlight. They don't stand on the podium or hold the trophies, but they're the reason their children ever get there in the first place. Coco's journey is a reflection of thousands of families, working-class parents who sacrifice time, comfort, and stability so their kids can chase something bigger. Most of them never get recognition. But in this case, someone noticed. Someone cared enough to step in and say, "You've done enough. It's time to rest." Moretti could have chosen to make a big public announcement or turn this into a PR stunt, but he didn't. He kept it private, quiet, and deeply personal. That's what made it resonate even more. It wasn't about publicity. It was about purpose. He didn't give Coco's parents charity. He gave them honor, real positions, meaningful roles, and the dignity that comes from knowing you've earned what you receive. And maybe that's why this story hits so hard. Because it's not just about Coco Gauff. It's about every parent who's ever worked themselves to exhaustion for their child's dream. And every child who's ever carried the unspoken weight of wanting to give something back. In a world obsessed with trophies, this moment showed that the greatest victory isn't always on the court. Sometimes it's the peace that comes after years of struggle. Coco Gauff's story isn't just a feel-good headline. It's a reminder of what real success looks like. Winning the French Open was incredible, but what came after was something far deeper. It wasn't just about tennis anymore. It was about love, family, and gratitude. The offer from Giovanni Moretti didn't just give her parents financial freedom. It gave Coco emotional freedom. It allowed her to step onto the court without fear, to play without the weight of obligation, and to enjoy the sport that once felt like a responsibility. In a single day, Coco experienced 2 victories, one for herself and one for the people who made her dream possible. That's what makes this story timeless, because it proves that behind every champion, there's always a team of quiet heroes whose sacrifices rarely get seen. And when those sacrifices are finally recognized, the result is more powerful than any trophy ever could be. So the next time you see Coco step onto the court with that calm, confident smile, remember this moment, the call, the tears, and the life-changing act of kindness that redefined her journey. This wasn't just a story about wealth, it was about worth. The worth of hard work, sacrifice, and unconditional love. If this story moved you, take a second to share it, and let me know in the comments what you would do if your family received a call like that. Because sometimes the most powerful victories don't happen under stadium lights, they happen quietly, in the moments when love and generosity collide. And if you want more stories that show the real heart behind the headlines, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next.